Let me ask you something that might make you deeply uncomfortable. What if everything you were ever taught about money, by your parents, your school, your boss, your bank, was fundamentally, dangerously wrong? Not wrong because the math was off. Not wrong because the advice was outdated. But wrong because it completely ignored the most powerful force in all of personal finance, the human mind. Here's a fact that will blow your mind. Ronald Read was a janitor in Vermont. He pumped gas, swept floors, and lived so frugally that most people who knew him assumed he had nothing. When he died in 2014 at the age of 92, his estate was worth $8 million. He left most of it to his local hospital and library. At the exact same time, Richard Fuscone, a Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive with every advantage money could buy, went completely bankrupt. His mansion was foreclosed. His wealth evaporated. A janitor beat a Wall Street executive. Not because of spreadsheets. Not because of an MBA. But because of behavior. Because of psychology. That is the central argument of one of the most important financial books ever written, The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Stay with me for the next 30 minutes. Because what you're about to learn isn't just about investing. It's about how you think, how you feel, and how those invisible forces shape your financial destiny far more than any stock tip or savings calculator ever could. If this kind of deep dive content helps you, smash that like button right now and subscribe, because we do this every week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Let's get into it. Chapter 1, No One's Crazy. Here's the first lesson, and it's one that will immediately make you more compassionate, toward others and toward yourself. No one is crazy with money. They're just playing a different game than you. Morgan Housel opens the book with a radical idea: every financial decision a person makes perfect sense to them, given their unique life experiences. Think about it. If you grew up during the Great Depression, you would hoard cash under your mattress even when interest rates are high, because you lived the terror of banks collapsing overnight. That's not irrational. That's survival instinct forged by real experience. If you grew up in a household where money was always flowing, where stocks went up every year in the 1990s bull market, you'd be far more comfortable taking risks in the market. Not because you're smarter, because you saw a different movie. Housel says, your personal experiences with money make up maybe 0.000000001% of what's happened in the world, but maybe 80% of how you think the world works. This is profound. Our financial behaviors aren't shaped by textbooks. They're shaped by the world we were born into, the dinner table conversations we heard as children, the financial traumas or triumphs our families experienced. The lesson? Before you judge someone for their financial choices, or beat yourself up for yours, ask, what movie were they watching? What experiences shaped that decision? Understanding this creates empathy. And empathy creates better conversations about money, which ultimately leads to better outcomes for everyone. Chapter 2, Luck and Risk, The Invisible Forces. Here's a truth that the finance world desperately doesn't want you to accept: luck plays a massive role in financial success. And so does risk. And they're two sides of the same coin. Housel uses Bill Gates as an example. Bill Gates is undeniably brilliant. But he also happened to attend Lakeside School, one of the only high schools in the entire world that had a computer terminal in 1968. The odds of any student attending that school at that moment in history were astronomically small. Gates himself has acknowledged this. His friend Kent Evans had similar talent and ambition, but Evans died in a mountaineering accident before he could see his potential realized. One life was shaped by extraordinary luck. Another by devastating risk. Neither had full control. Now here's where it gets really uncomfortable. When someone gets extraordinarily wealthy, we look for what they did right. We write books about them. We study their habits. We try to copy their morning routines. But when someone goes bankrupt, we blame their character. We say they were irresponsible, lazy, or greedy. Housel argues we need to be far more humble. Some outcomes are more about the dice roll than the decision. This doesn't mean effort doesn't matter. It absolutely does. But it means we should be cautious about worshipping any single financial role model. Avoid assuming that failure always equals foolishness. Build strategies that survive bad luck, not just ones that capitalize on good luck. The practical takeaway? Don't risk what you can't afford to lose, just because someone else got rich doing it. Their luck may not transfer with their strategy. Chapter 3, Never Enough, The Trap That Destroys the Rich. This chapter might be the most important one in the entire book. And it's the one most people skip. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. Housel tells the story of Rajat Gupta, a man who rose from nothing in Kolkata to become the CEO of McKinsey, one of the most prestigious firms on earth. He was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He had access to the most powerful people on the planet. And then he threw it all away by trading on insider information. He wanted more. He ended up in federal prison. Why would someone with hundreds of millions of dollars risk everything for more money? Because of a disease Housel calls never enough. It's not greed in the cartoon villain sense. It's something deeper, the feeling that no matter what you achieve, you're always comparing yourself to someone who has slightly more. Someone with a bigger house. A faster jet. A larger portfolio. And that comparison eats you alive. Housel introduces a stunning contrast. Warren Buffett and his longtime partner Charlie Munger have a dear friend named Walter Schloss who delivered extraordinary investment returns over decades. But he never became famous. Never became a billionaire. Why? Because he was content. He knew when enough was enough. Here's the antidote Housel offers. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. Social comparison is the thief of wealth satisfaction. Enough is not too little. Knowing your enough number isn't giving up, it's the most powerful financial move you can make. Enough means you never have to risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. Write that last one down. Read it every morning. Chapter 4, Confounding Compounding, the Eighth Wonder of the World. Now let's talk about the force that Albert Einstein allegedly called the eighth wonder of the world. Compounding. And why your brain is completely incapable of intuitively grasping it. Here's a fact about Warren Buffett that will completely reframe how you think about investing. Warren Buffett's net worth at age 65 was approximately $3.8 billion. His net worth today is over $100 billion. Do the math. That means roughly 97% of Warren Buffett's wealth was created after his 65th birthday. Most people's careers are winding down at 65. Buffett's compounding machine was just getting started. Housel makes a staggering point: Buffett's genius isn't just his investment skill. It's that he started investing seriously at age 10, and never stopped. He's been compounding for over 80 years. If Buffett had started investing at 30 and retired at 60, like most people, with the same annual returns, his net worth would be approximately $11.9 million. Not $100 billion. $11.9 million. Extraordinary by normal standards. But 99.9% less than what he actually accumulated. The difference? Time. Here's the mind-bending implication: the best investment strategy isn't the one with the highest returns. It's the one you can stick with for the longest period of time. A 12% annual return for 20 years destroys a 20% annual return for 10 years. Not because of math magic, because of time in the market. The practical lesson is almost laughably simple. Start as early as possible. Never interrupt compounding unnecessarily. Be patient in a way that feels almost boring. As Housel puts it, good investing isn't necessarily about earning the highest returns. It's about earning pretty good returns that you can stick with for a very long period of time. Chapter 5, Getting Wealthy versus Staying Wealthy, Two Completely Different Skills. This is one of the most underrated distinctions in all of personal finance, and almost nobody talks about it. Getting rich and staying rich require completely opposite personality traits. Getting rich requires optimism, bold bets, concentration of risk, confidence in a vision. You need to believe, often against the evidence, that something will work. Staying rich requires the opposite. Humility, diversification, paranoia about what could go wrong. The constant acknowledgement that luck played a role in your success, and that luck can reverse. Housel uses the example of Jesse Livermore, one of the greatest stock traders in history. In 1929, he short-sold the stock market crash and made the equivalent of $3 billion in today's money. He was on top of the world. Years later, he lost it all. Went broke. And ultimately took his own life. Getting rich had required one set of skills. Staying rich required a completely different set, and he never developed them. Here's what survival in finance actually looks like, according to Housel. 1. More than big returns, aim for unbreakable finances. The goal isn't to maximize upside. It's to ensure you're never forced to sell at the wrong time. Avoid scenarios that eliminate you from the game. 2. Plan for the plan not going to plan. Housel calls this leaving room for error. Every financial plan should assume that something will go wrong, because over long enough time horizons, something always does. 3. Embrace the idea that you can be wrong half the time and still be fine. Surviving financially isn't about being right. It's about the consequences of being wrong being survivable. The single most important financial goal, Housel argues, is not wealth maximization, it is wealth preservation. Stay in the game long enough, and compounding does the heavy lifting. Chapter 6, Tails, You Win, Why a Few Decisions Drive Everything. Here's a statistic that should change how you think about every financial mistake you've ever made. In the S&P 500, from 1980 to 2020, roughly 40% of all stocks were essentially worthless, losing 70% or more of their value and never recovering. And yet, the index as a whole delivered extraordinary returns over that period. How? Because a small number of stocks, Amazon, Apple, Google, Microsoft, delivered such enormous gains that they more than compensated for hundreds of failures. This is what statisticians call a tail event, a rare outcome with an outsized impact. And Housel argues that tails drive everything in finance. Venture capitalists know this better than anyone. A top-tier VC fund might invest in 20 companies expecting that 15 will fail, 4 will do okay, and 1 will be a 100x return that carries the entire portfolio. Here's why this matters for you. It means your failures don't define you. Buffett owned over 400 stocks over his lifetime. A handful of them created the majority of his wealth. It means being right most of the time is far less important than the magnitude of your right decisions. It means diversification isn't just protection, it's the mechanism that keeps you in the game long enough to catch a tail. Housel also applies this to life decisions. Anything that is huge, profitable, famous, or influential is the result of a tail event. Amazon was nearly bankrupt. Apple was days from failure in 1997. Disney bet everything on Snow White. These weren't inevitable successes, they were tail events that survived long enough to change the world. The lesson: don't be paralyzed by the failure rate. Focus on the magnitude of success when you're right, and keep yourself positioned to participate. Chapter 7, Freedom, the Real Definition of Wealth. Let's pause the financial strategy talk for a moment. Because Housel drops a philosophical bomb in this chapter that might be the most important thing in the entire book. The highest form of wealth isn't money. It's the ability to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, for as long as you want. Housel cites research showing that having a sense of control over your own life is one of the strongest predictors of happiness. More than income. More than social status. More than the quality of your relationships, in some studies. And yet, here's the cruel irony, most people pursue money in ways that eliminate their freedom. They take high-paying jobs that demand 80-hour weeks. They buy expensive houses that chain them to their mortgage. They drive luxury cars to signal status, and spend decades working to pay for that signal. They trade the very thing money is supposed to provide, freedom, in order to get more money. Housel argues that the ideal use of money is to buy back your time. Not necessarily to stop working, but to work on your terms. To be able to say no to things that don't align with your values. He also makes a heartbreaking observation: over the last 50 years, Americans have seen massive increases in income, technology, and productivity. But surveys consistently show that happiness hasn't increased proportionally. Why? Because economic growth created a hedonic treadmill. More money led to bigger expectations, longer commutes, more complex lives, and less control over daily schedules. The practical takeaway? Define what freedom means to you before you define what wealth means to you. Because if your financial goals don't give you more control over your time, what exactly are you working toward? Chapter 8, Man in the Car Paradox: Nobody cares about your stuff. This chapter is short. But it's devastating. When you see someone driving a beautiful Ferrari, what do you think? You don't think, "What an impressive person." You think, "Imagine if that were me." You project yourself into the car. The driver becomes invisible. Housel calls this the man in the car paradox. We buy things to get admiration from others, but those others are just using us as a prop to imagine themselves in our place. Nobody is thinking about you as much as you think they are. And here's the financial devastation this causes: people spend enormous amounts of money on status symbols, cars, watches, houses, clothes, hoping to win the respect and admiration of others. But the admiration they receive, if any, is for the object, not for them. And it evaporates the moment the next person drives by with a newer model. Housel observes, humility, kindness, and empathy will bring you more respect than any horsepower ever will. If your financial goal is to impress people, you will spend a lifetime on a hamster wheel. The goalposts move infinitely. The admiration is temporary. And the bill is permanent. Save for freedom. Not for status. Chapter 9, Wealth is what you don't see. Building on the last chapter, here's a truth that runs completely counter to how we're taught to think about wealth. Real wealth is invisible. The car in the driveway, the watch on the wrist, the suit on the back, these aren't wealth. These are wealth converted into things that can be seen. Real wealth is the investment account nobody knows about. The emergency fund that lets you sleep at night. The option value of being able to quit a bad job tomorrow. The paid-off mortgage. The $100,000 sitting in an index fund that will be worth $800,000 in 30 years. We have no idea how wealthy most people truly are, or aren't, because wealth, by definition, is unspent. This creates a dangerous illusion. We look at people with expensive things and assume they're rich. We buy expensive things to look rich. And in doing so, we become less rich. Housel is clear: spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. The most quietly wealthy people you'll ever meet often look completely unremarkable. Because they prioritized having money over looking like they have money. Chapter 10, Save Money, the simplest wealth-building tool nobody uses. After all the philosophy, Housel gets startlingly practical in this section. You don't need a specific reason to save money. We tend to think of saving as goal-oriented, saving for a house, for retirement, for a car. But Housel argues the most valuable thing you can save for is something you can't predict. Because life is full of surprises. Job losses. Medical emergencies. Opportunities that require capital to seize. Downturns that require patience to survive. An emergency fund isn't just safety, it's option value. It's the ability to take the better job that pays 20% less but offers more freedom. It's the ability to hold your investments through a crash instead of selling in panic. Here's the argument Housel makes that might permanently change how you think about savings. You can build wealth without a high income. Because wealth is the gap between what you earn and what you spend. A person earning $50,000 and saving 25% of their income will, over time, be wealthier than a person earning $200,000 and spending all of it. The savings rate is the most controllable variable in your financial life. Returns are uncertain. Income fluctuates. Markets crash. But your savings rate? That's entirely up to you, every single day. And unlike optimizing investments, which requires expertise, luck, and time, reducing lifestyle inflation requires only awareness. It doesn't take a finance degree. It takes a choice. Chapter 11, Reasonable Irrational, the Human Element of Money. Here's a counterintuitive idea from one of the book's most fascinating chapters. You don't need to be perfectly rational with money. You need to be reasonable. Finance textbooks will tell you the mathematically optimal thing to do. Hold only index funds. Never sell in a downturn. Maximize tax-advantaged accounts. Diversify globally. All of that is mathematically correct. And most people can't do it. Not because they're stupid, because they're human. Housel argues that a strategy you can actually stick to will always beat an optimal strategy you abandon in a panic. Example: some people keep some of their investments in individual stocks even though index funds would statistically serve them better. Why? Because owning a piece of a company they believe in keeps them engaged with investing. It keeps them from abandoning the market entirely during downturns. Is it perfectly rational? No. Is it reasonable for that person? Absolutely. Housel says, aim to be mostly reasonable. Reasonable is more achievable and more sustainable, and frankly just as good in most circumstances. The most elegant financial plan is useless if you can't emotionally sustain it through a 40% market crash. A slightly less elegant plan that you actually follow for 30 years will always win. This is also why the advice, just don't look at your portfolio, works for some people. It's not rational, the portfolio's value doesn't change based on whether you're watching. But emotionally, it prevents panic selling. And that keeps you in the game. Chapter 12, Surprise. History is misleading. One final mind-bending idea before we wrap up. The further back in history you look, the more misleading the data becomes for predicting the future. Investors love historical data. The market has returned 10% annually for 100 years, they say. And they use that to build retirement projections. But here's the problem: the world changes. The financial structures of 1920 are nothing like those of 2020. The dollar used to be backed by gold. The entire regulatory landscape of Wall Street was transformed multiple times. Global supply chains didn't exist a century ago. The specific events that created historical returns are largely unrepeatable. Housel isn't saying history is useless. He's saying we should use it to understand human behavior, which doesn't change much, rather than to predict specific market outcomes, which are shaped by unpredictable events. The lesson: build a financial plan that can survive scenarios you've never seen before. Not just the scenarios you've read about. Because the most dangerous financial event of your life will almost certainly be one that nobody saw coming. COVID-19 wasn't in anyone's financial model in 2019. The 2008 financial crisis was, by definition, a surprise to those who lived through it. The next great disruption will be equally unexpected. Margin of safety, having more buffer than you think you need, is how you survive surprises. Let's conclude and recap key lessons. The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel isn't a book about picking stocks, analyzing balance sheets, or following a specific budgeting system. It's a book about the invisible forces: your history, your emotions, your ego, your fear, your greed, that determine whether you build or destroy wealth over a lifetime. Here are the 10 core lessons, one final time. 1. No one is crazy, everyone's financial behavior makes sense given their life experiences. 2. Luck and risk are more powerful than we admit, stay humble about success, compassionate about failure. 3. Define enough, the goalpost that never stops moving will destroy you. 4. Compounding rewards patience above all else, time in the market beats timing the market, every single time. 5. Getting wealthy and staying wealthy are different skills, survival is the ultimate financial strategy. 6. Tails drive everything, a few big wins can more than compensate for many losses. 7. Freedom is the real definition of wealth, money should buy you control over your time, nothing else. 8. Nobody cares about your stuff, stop spending to impress people who aren't thinking about you. 9. Real wealth is invisible, it's what you don't spend. 10. Be reasonable, not perfectly rational, a strategy you can sustain beats a perfect strategy you abandon. Now here's what I want you to do right now. Not tomorrow. Right now. First, ask yourself this one question that Morgan Housel says almost nobody asks: what is my enough number? What amount of money would allow you to live the life you genuinely want, not the life social media tells you to want? Write it down. Put it somewhere you'll see it every day. Second, if this audiobook gave you one new idea about how you think about money, subscribe my channel and share it with one person. Just one. A friend, a partner, a sibling. Because financial literacy isn't just a personal skill, it's a gift you give to the people around you. And if you want to go even deeper on books like this, leave a comment below telling me which book you want me to cover next. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next one.